Good afternoon. This is Mike Furman with Iredell Free News. We're here at the administrative offices of Iredell Statesville Schools with Superintendent Jeff James. Dr. James, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be back.
Now, we're here on the last full school day of 2022. Students and staff will be starting their winter break later today. Thought it'd be a good opportunity to look back a little bit on the past 12 months and then look ahead to 2023. Recently, you've gotten some academic data. Good news.
Absolutely. So even in the midst of a pandemic, when the data come in from EOC testing at the end of last year, Iredell County, actually out of 116 school systems, had the least amount of learning loss. And we're not happy about learning loss. It was 11%, but as I went through the spreadsheet, unfortunately there were counties 65-70% learning loss. So that gap's almost impossible to close. In a short amount of time, it can be closed. Any great plan put in place can definitely close that gap. But I actually was interviewed on NPR radio with Andos Sounds and talked about some of the data and actually looked at subgroup data. And of course, since they stem out of Charlotte, of course they brought Charlotte Meck in. But I think the gist of the whole program was about the counties that decided to go face-to-face when we were allowed to by the governor. October 5th of last year, we jumped right on October 5th the year before, we jumped right on learning immediately, brought all kids back in K-5. We weren't able to do it because of the distancing at high school, so we're on an A-day, B-day rotation, but we did bring kids back in April the 7th. So we feel like that was a very wise decision, and it proved out because we had the least amount of learning loss. So even in the midst of a pandemic, U.S. News and World Report does a yearly report on schools across the nation. So we had 6 elementary schools named as top performing schools in the nation, and 2 of our middle schools, and 3 of our high schools have shared that accolade over the past few years. So a lot of great things going on in the county, and I attribute that to the hard work. It's been a tough year. We talked about positions. We're down about 75 positions. And much like the businesses in our county are struggling to find workers, it's just been a tough time, very tough time on school staffs dealing with COVID and the like. So again, some great news there. We've had quite a few athletes sign on scholarships moving forward. And of course, 3A, we had Statesville High School go 4 deep. They got beat by Dudley, but a great football season for them. So a lot of great things going on throughout the county. Excited about the mid-year program at Statesville High School. We just got approval for the mid-year, so that's part of the IB process. So moving forward with that. Cats, we had some conversation about possibly looking at NAIF Academy for cats for 11th and 12th grade, expanding some of our programs with career technical. Actually, the welding program is fairly robust. We sort of struggled with it. Partnership with Mitchell, we have it full, and actually had to add a teacher assistant for safety in the program, so that was pretty neat. And actually have some females welding, so if doesn't matter gender, we have, matter of fact, some of the females, some of the stuff they're welding is pretty neat. They're doing some Christmas art. So again, a lot of industries out there looking for workers, so trying to continue to be a good steward and provide those. But we've had a couple students this year. One went to Princeton, one went to Harvard. I had them on the radio show, done a great job. If you didn't listen last Friday on Whammy, the Statesville Choir did an awesome job. It was just amazing, the talent those young people had. So just great things going on in our schools, even in the midst of this pandemic. But the other thing, child nutrition. So one of the concerns, of course, we have is we are doing free breakfast, free lunch, and I will tell you that the number of meals we're serving, we've almost exceeded 90,000, which would be an all-time record. And what that tells me, Mike, is there were a lot of kids not eating that really would have. So I just read that USDA just appropriated $1.5 billion to continue free breakfast, free lunch. And actually, we're providing about 3,000 meals for supper for some kids through that program also, but there's a long process to make that happen, but our child nutrition people have really hit a home run. We thought we were going to end up the year in the red. We actually ended up about 300,000 in the black in child nutrition. This will be a record year if we continue the way we're going. Another great thing we done this year was able to do some efficiency routing on our buses, remove 15 buses for a tune of about $300,000 in savings. So, and that said, our board also stepped up. In the last year and a half, we've actually put back $8.5 million to employees, whether it be classified or certified. We've raised the supplement. Classified's up to 5.35%, and certified ranges between about 6.7 and 7.2. Our goal is to continue to raise that to be competitive with our stipends with other counties. Great thing with the state, we're part of the 95 counties that were approved for additional funds for teacher stipends. So it looks like on average we're getting about $570. That's on average, so that doesn't mean every teacher gets it. There'll be some that get less, some that get more, but that will help us attract teachers in counties where it's not the economic engines like you have in Charlotte, Meck, or Wake, larger counties.
So are you still offering the sign-on bonuses for certain positions?
Yes. EC, exceptional children, special needs teachers, are in short supply in the state, and everyone's competing for the few that are out there. So $3,500 sign-on bonus. We actually pay an additional $1,000 retention bonus for special needs teachers. That's our highest category, about 18 teaching positions down.
Wow.
So it really puts, and of course, then when we have exclusions happen with COVID, we already are down staff. So if 3 or 4 of our staff members end up sick, it sort of is hard to have school because substitutes typically don't want to come in the building if numbers are high.
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about some of the successes this year. Looking ahead to 2023, let's talk about a few of the challenges. Let's start with COVID.
Well, COVID, of course, we've seen this new variant come out. I will say that the numbers the health department shared with me this week, I'm seeing a lot more younger kids that are testing positive. Greatly, a lot of those kids are asymptomatic. They may not ever get sick, but we are seeing more kids that test positive are being excluded. One of the challenges, Mike, is, and I think we both can agree on this date, is we're excluding a lot of kids that it looks like we could come up with a better way as we look at the data, because the in-school transmission is still relatively low. So I do know that there's going to be a meeting at the first of the year. North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has to adopt several different things. Test to stay is one of the things the CDC has said. But again, I'm in constant contact with Jane Henson here, our health director, and the state, and that looks like about the first week of January there'll be some conversation about test to stay. The president has released a lot of test kits. There is an antigen test an antibody test if you have antibodies. But the problem is right now getting into a doctor to get an antibody test. And so I've reached out to several vendors to try to see if those are available. But the antibody tests are in short supply also. So there are places that we use that will do the antibody testing, but you're good for about 90 days if you have the antibodies.
But the test to stay program seems very complicated.
It is, and so what I'm hearing, the little bit that I have heard, is that if you're a district that's mask optional, it's probably not going to be offered initially for that. They need to develop more data, because there is some data out there that says that districts that masks tend to have less transmission, less exclusion. The exclusion rules are written for you to mask. I think we can all read that and figure that one out pretty simple. So of course, I think initially it's probably going to be for districts that mask, test to stay, and then do some studies in districts that choose to have mask optional, trying to work, because it's apparent that we're going to continue to get hit with viral strains. And as we've proven as a district, face-to-face learning works for about 95% of our kids. There's just a small percentage that can actually do virtual and be successful. But the social interaction and sports, unfortunately, when we have COVID hit a sports team, it takes out the whole team in most cases. So those kids really want to play. So some coaches have, asked players to stay 6 foot apart. So one of the rules, so you won't fall in that 15 minutes within 6 feet. So either that or at least mask while you're on the bench. The board did vote to come back mask. And again, we can debate both sides of that. But at the end of the day, you know, we have proven keeping kids in school in a seat is the best way to educate a child. And that's all we're trying to do. So hopefully that will help us there, but I am happy to say we're going to continue with the free breakfast and free lunch. That looks like another year. So that's going to be a godsend, I think, for many parents. But we need workers. We have jobs available, custodians, teacher assistants. We need substitutes. So, you know, when the numbers go back up, unfortunately our substitutes are older people. They tend not to sub as much. That's statewide. We have seen substitute fill rates as low as 28%. We're back up to about 72. And before the pandemic, we were pushing about 88 to 90.
So what happens if you have 3 teachers out at a school and there's no sub?
So what we have to do, of course, there's a matrix that I did present because the board asked me to look at exclusions based on classroom, grade level, school. So what we do is drop the numbers in the matrix, and what it comes down to, do we have enough adults in the building to teach your child and provide safe supervision? And unfortunately it goes through our staff just like it does some of the students. And again, there's not a high percentage but the exclusions also take our staff members out. So it makes it impossible to run a school, and we understand it's a hardship on parents. We try to make that decision a couple days in advance, but what we've seen happen is if your school started having cases on a Monday, by Tuesday it might have quadrupled, or, you know, by the time you start looking at exclusion. So a lot of controversy around contact tracing still, but we do have it down to a science, and we honestly try to not exclude any child. So that was one of the conversations, you know, that we had with the health department and what's going on. But yeah, we got to come up with a better way, because we're excluding a lot of kids that are not sick or asymptomatic. And the more kids that test, the more we're seeing that are. So I think if we tested every child, we'd find that there would be a high percentage that actually test positive, but they basically never get the symptoms.
Right. But the issue is, can they still spread it to someone who could get sick?
Yeah, and that's always bothers you, and I do get emails, and the board does, about, you know, I have for Christmas, you know, and I'm going to have some elderly parents in, and we've seen it punch through, the Omicron punch through even those that are vaccinated. So it's not an easy decision, and I mean, some people make it in their mind very simple, but you know, we hear both sides of it, and we're just trying to keep kids in a seat. That is the main focus of every educator in this district. They know that that's where the rubber meets the road. We proved it. Right. We had the least amount of learning loss.
Right. Well, that is a great point to end our conversation on. I appreciate you taking the time, and enjoy your holiday break.
Thank you.